They forced a veteran Navy SEAL to leave his own home, with nothing but the cold waiting outside. He walked out with no money, no vehicle, and only one clear direction left: the road down to town. But before he could take it, his dog stepped in front of him and refused to move. Then it pulled him the other way, into the forest, towards something buried deep beneath the mountain. What they found wasn't just shelter. It was a hidden place built for someone who was never meant to be found. And when a deadly snowstorm arrived, that place became the only thing standing between strangers and death. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories. The house hadn't changed. Not really. The same warped wooden floorboards still creaked beneath Ethan Calder's boots as he stepped inside. The same low ceiling pressed the air down into something heavy and familiar. The same old kitchen table sat in the center of the room, scarred with knife marks and burn stains from decades of use. Even the clock above the sink still ticked with that steady, stubborn rhythm, like it had outlived everything else in the valley. But something was wrong. Ethan felt it before he could name it. The air didn't carry warmth anymore. It didn't carry memory. It just sat there. Cold. Quiet. Waiting. He stood in the doorway for a moment, shoulders filling the frame, the broad shape of a man who had spent years being shaped into something hard and precise. At 43, Ethan Calder carried the kind of strength that didn't need to prove itself. Lean muscle built for endurance, not show. His face was angular, carved by time and experience, a faint shadow of stubble along his jawline. His blue-gray eyes scanned the room once, slow and careful, missing nothing but reacting to almost nothing. Behind him, Ronan stepped inside. The German Shepherd moved like a shadow, silent, controlled, every step deliberate. His black and tan coat caught the dim light, the muscles along his shoulders shifting smoothly under the surface. His ears were forward, his gaze alert. Not restless, not anxious. Just aware, watching, always watching. Ethan closed the door behind them. The sound was soft. Too soft. He noticed the clock again. Tick, tick, tick. And then he saw them. Owen Mercer sat at the far side of the table, shoulders slightly hunched, hands clasped too tightly together. He was taller than Ethan remembered, or maybe just thinner. His frame stretched awkwardly beneath a gray flannel shirt, his brown hair combed too neatly, as if trying to compensate for something he couldn't fix. His eyes flicked up once, then down again, unable to hold Ethan's gaze. Clara Mercer sat beside him. Where Owen looked like he might fold under pressure, Clara looked like she had already decided how this would end. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, with sharp features and pale skin that seemed untouched by the sun. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back into a tight knot, not a strand out of place. Even sitting, she carried herself with a kind of rigid control, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had long gone cold. She didn't look surprised to see him. She had been waiting. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes moved once across the table and stopped. The cup. It was still there. A chipped enamel mug, white with a blue rim. His father's. There was a faint ring of dried coffee around the inside, the handle worn smooth from years of use. It hadn't been washed. It hadn't been moved. It had just been left. For a second, just a second, something shifted in Ethan's chest. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. Clara noticed where he was looking. Without a word, she reached out, took the mug, and slid it aside to make space. Then she placed a stack of papers on the table. Just like that. No ceremony, no hesitation. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That was when Ronan moved. The dog stepped forward, placing himself between Ethan and the table. Not aggressively, not with a growl, just a solid presence, muscle and instinct drawn into a line that said more than sound ever could. Clara stiffened slightly. "Control your dog," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried that same controlled edge as everything else about her. Ethan's hand dropped to Ronan's neck. The fur was warm under his palm. "He's fine," Ethan said quietly. Ronan didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Owen shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. "Ethan, we need to talk." Ethan looked at him, really looked this time, at the way Owen's fingers kept tightening and loosening, at the way he wouldn't meet his eyes, at the paper in front of him that he hadn't touched yet. He already knew. "You've stayed long enough," Clara said. There it was. Clean, final, no build-up, no apology. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Stayed," he repeated. The word tasted strange. Owen finally spoke, his voice quieter, less certain. "The will's been settled?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the papers, then back to Owen. "And?" Owen swallowed. "The house, the land, it's in my name now." Silence settled into the room again, heavy this time, not empty, full of everything that wasn't being said. Ethan glanced once more at the mug, at the table, at the window beyond it. The one that looked out over the tree line he'd grown up running through as a kid, boots too big for his feet, chasing shadows and trying to prove something to a man who never asked him to. He had fixed fences here, split wood, buried the dog that used to sleep under the porch. And 3 weeks ago, he had buried the only man who ever called him son. "I've been here my whole life," Ethan said. Clara didn't blink. "You came back?" The difference hung there, sharp, unforgiving. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. Behind him, Ronan shifted slightly. A low, almost inaudible sound vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, not quite. Something deeper, something certain. Ethan's hand tightened gently on the dog's neck. Easy. Ronan stilled. But he didn't step back. Owen pushed his chair out, standing now. "We're not trying to make this harder than it has to be." Ethan almost smiled at that. Almost. "Then don't," he said. Clara folded her arms. "You don't have a job. You don't contribute, and we're not running a charity." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, not anger, recognition. At 8 years old, he had sat at this same table eating canned soup because that was all they could afford. At 16, he had been out in the snow fixing fence lines while Owen stayed inside studying. At 19, he had left because there hadn't been another option. And now, he was standing here being told he had never really belonged. Ronan suddenly stepped forward, not toward the door, not toward the hallway, toward the window. His entire body went rigid, ears forward, eyes locked on something out in the darkness beyond the glass. Ethan frowned slightly. "What is it?" The dog didn't respond, didn't move, just stared, into the forest, as if something out there had called his name. For a split second, Ethan felt it too, a pull, faint, but real. Then it was gone. Ronan exhaled slowly and stepped back. But something had changed. Ethan turned back to the table. Owen was watching him now, waiting. "Look," Owen said, softer this time. "You've got until morning." Ethan shook his head once. "No." Both of them blinked. "I'll go now." Clara didn't argue. Of course she didn't. Ethan turned toward the hallway. His room was exactly as he had left it. Simple, sparse. A bed, a dresser, a duffel bag, sitting half-packed from a life that had never settled anywhere long enough to unpack. He moved through it methodically. Shirts, socks, the old jacket he'd worn overseas, the photograph. He hesitated there. His father stood in the picture, younger, stronger, one hand resting on a boy's shoulder. Ethan at 12, trying to stand straighter than he felt. Ethan slipped it into the bag. That was it. Everything he owned fit into something he could carry. Ronan stayed close the entire time, watching, silent. When Ethan zipped the bag shut, the sound felt louder than it should have been. Final. Back in the kitchen, Owen and Clara hadn't moved. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't try to stop him. Ethan walked past them. At the door, he paused. Not because he expected anything, but because something inside him needed to be sure. Nothing came. He opened the door. The cold hit him immediately. Sharp, clean, real. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped onto the porch. Ronan followed without hesitation. Behind them, the door closed. Not slammed. Just shut. Ethan stood there for a second, the silence of the valley stretching out in front of him. For a brief moment, the wind shifted, and the sound twisted in his mind. Rotor blades, smoke, ash. His breath hitched. Ronan pressed his nose firmly against Ethan's wrist, grounding. Ethan blinked. The forest snapped back into place. He let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he muttered. His hand rested briefly on the dog's head. "I'm here." He adjusted the strap of his pack. Most people would have turned toward town, toward light, toward other people. Ethan Calder didn't. He stepped off the porch and turned toward the forest, toward the dark line of trees rising along the eastern ridge. He didn't know why, not yet. But something in him, something older than reason, refused to go the other way. Snow fell softly as he walked, each step carrying him further from everything he had known. And beside him, Ronan moved in silence, watching, waiting, like he already knew where they were going. Ethan Calder didn't plan to go deeper into the forest. Not at first. When he stepped off the porch and into the snow the night before, instinct had told him one thing: find a road, find people, survive. That was the rule. It had always been the rule. But morning changed things. Light came slowly, seeping through the tall northern pines like something careful, something deliberate. It painted the snow in pale gold and long shadows, turning the forest into something almost beautiful, if you ignored the cold biting through every layer of clothing. Ethan stood still for a moment, breath fogging in the crisp air. He should have gone down, toward town, toward warmth, even if it came with judgment. Instead, he was standing knee-deep in untouched snow, staring into a stretch of wilderness that only got denser the farther it went. Behind him, faint and already fading, were his own footprints. Ahead, nothing. Ronan moved first. The German shepherd didn't hesitate. He stepped forward with that same controlled confidence, nose low to the ground, then lifting, testing the air. His ears twitched once, twice, adjusting to something invisible. Not random, not wandering. Purpose. Ethan frowned slightly. "Not that way," he said, his voice low, rough from the cold. He turned his body toward the slope that led down to the valley road. Ronan immediately stepped in front of him, not aggressively, but firm, blocking. Ethan stopped. For a long second, the two of them just stood there. The man and the dog, both stubborn, both unwilling to yield. Ethan exhaled slowly. "We're not going deeper." Ronan didn't move, didn't blink. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached forward and gently caught the edge of Ethan's sleeve in his teeth. Not pulling hard. Just enough. A signal. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen that before, in places where hesitation got people killed, in moments where Ronan had chosen a path before Ethan had time to think. "Let go," Ethan muttered. Ronan pulled once, then released, then turned, and walked deeper into the forest. Ethan stood there, alone for exactly 2 seconds. Then he followed. Not because he trusted the direction, but because he trusted the one leading it. The forest opened and closed around them like a breathing thing. Tall pine trunks rose endlessly on either side, their bark dark and rough, branches heavy with snow that occasionally fell in soft, muffled bursts. Sunlight filtered through in narrow beams, catching in the drifting frost and turning the air itself into something visible. It was beautiful and completely indifferent. Ethan moved steadily, his boots crunching through layers of snow, each step requiring more effort than the last. His breath came out in slow, measured bursts, the rhythm controlled, trained. But the cold was patient. It found its way through seams, through gloves, through memory. At some point, the wind shifted, and with it came the sound. Low at first, distant, then closer. Rotor blades. Ethan froze, his body locked before his mind could catch up. The trees blurred slightly at the edges. The snow wasn't snow anymore. Not in his head. It was ash, drifting down in slow, silent pieces. His chest tightened, his breathing shortened. Not here. Not again. A firm pressure hit his wrist. Warm. Real. Ronan. The dog stood close, pressing his nose firmly against Ethan's pulse point. Not once, not twice. Repeated. Steady. Grounding. Ethan blinked hard. The forest snapped back into place. Pines, snow, silence. No rotors, no smoke, just the cold. "Yeah," Ethan muttered under his breath. "I know." Ronan stepped back but stayed close, watching. They kept moving. Hours passed, or something close to it. Time didn't behave normally out here. Ethan's body began to feel the cost. Hunger came first, a dull ache that sharpened slowly. Then the fatigue, settling into his legs, his shoulders, the base of his spine. Every step required more thought, more effort. Still, Ronan didn't slow. If anything, he became more focused. His movements changed subtly. Less scanning, more tracking. His nose hovered just above the surface now, occasionally pressing into the snow, then lifting sharply. His ears stayed forward, locked on something ahead. Ethan noticed it. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Ronan didn't respond, but his pace shifted, angling slightly off the natural path Ethan would have taken, toward higher ground. The terrain changed gradually. The forest thickened, the trees growing closer together, their roots twisting through the earth beneath the snow. The ground rose, uneven and harder to navigate. Hidden rocks shifted underfoot, forcing Ethan to slow just enough to keep his balance. The air felt different here, subtle, but noticeable. Ethan paused. His breath caught slightly, not from exertion, from something else. The cold wasn't as sharp. He frowned. That didn't make sense. He crouched slightly, brushing his glove against the surface of the snow. It felt the same, looked the same. But when he held his hand just above it, he felt it. Faint, a whisper of warmth. He stilled. Ronan turned his head, watching him. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You felt that too." Ronan suddenly stopped. Completely. His body went rigid, ears forward, eyes locked on something ahead. Ethan followed his gaze. At first, nothing. Just a slope of rock partially buried beneath snow, tangled with dead branches and thick vines that had frozen into place over time. ordinary. Except it wasn't. Ethan stepped closer. Slowly. Something about the way the snow settled there wasn't natural. Too smooth in some places, too shallow in others, as if something underneath was shaping it. Ronan moved forward, then began to dig. Not playful, not curious, fast, deliberate. Snow flew backward in sharp bursts as his paws tore into the surface. Ethan crouched beside him. "What are you?" His glove hit something hard. Not rock. Smoother, colder. He brushed the snow away. Metal, a curved edge, buried deep. Ethan's breath slowed. "That's not natural," he whispered. Ronan kept digging. Relentless. The snow gave way faster now. Ethan used both hands, clearing away the surface, exposing more of the shape beneath. A ring, iron, half buried in stone, not random, placed. Ethan sat back slightly, his exhaustion forgotten for the moment. "Who put something like this out here?" Ronan didn't stop. He dug around the base, uncovering the edge of something larger. Stone, but not like the surrounding rock. Too even, too deliberate. Ethan stood, stepping back to take in the full picture. The slope wasn't just a slope. It was a wall. Hidden. Blended into the natural terrain with years, maybe decades, of growth. Vines, roots, snow, all masking something that wasn't meant to be seen. And then he saw it. The outline. Faint. But there. Edges that didn't follow the randomness of nature. Lines that had been made by hands. Ethan's chest tightened. Memory flickered. A voice. His father's. Low, firm, final. "You don't go up there." Ethan had been maybe 10 years old, standing at the edge of the tree line, staring up at this same ridge. Why? Because some places aren't meant for you. He had never asked again. Not because he agreed, but because of the way his father had said it. Not angry, not afraid, just certain. Ethan looked at the structure in front of him now. The stone, the hidden edges, the metal ring. And suddenly, it didn't feel like a warning anymore. It felt like a direction. Ronan stepped back, breathing harder now, snow clinging to his fur. He looked up at Ethan, waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "I see it." He reached down, gripping the iron ring. Cold bit into his palm through the glove. He hesitated, just for a second, then pulled. At first, nothing. Then, a shift. Subtle, but real. Stone grinding against stone. Ethan's muscles tightened as he pulled harder, the weight resisting, then giving slightly. A narrow gap formed. Darkness beneath. Still air. Different. Not the sharp biting cold of the outside. Something contained. Ethan stared at it. Every instinct split in two directions. Stay out or go in. Ronan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, pushing his head into the gap, then squeezing through with controlled effort. Gone. Swallowed by the dark. Ethan's hand tightened on the ring. "Ronan." No response. Just silence. He crouched lower, peering into the opening. Nothing but shadow, and a faint shift of air. He could walk away. Find another path. Try to survive out there. Or trust the one thing that hadn't failed him yet. Ethan let go of the ring, dropped to one knee, and followed. The darkness swallowed Ethan Calder almost immediately. The narrow opening above sealed off the last trace of daylight, leaving only a dim gray outline behind him. The air changed the moment he stepped inside. Still cold, but different. Controlled. Sheltered. It didn't bite at his lungs the way the wind outside had. He crouched instinctively, one hand brushing along the stone wall beside him. Rough, cold, real. "Ronan," he called quietly. His voice didn't echo the way he expected. It didn't carry far. The space absorbed sound, holding it close, as if the mountain itself was listening. A faint movement answered him. Not a bark, not a growl, just the sound of something shifting deeper ahead. Ethan moved forward, slowly, each step careful. The ground sloped downward, forcing him to bend slightly as the ceiling dipped lower. Jagged edges brushed his jacket, catching for a moment before letting go. The deeper he went, the steadier the temperature became. That alone made his pulse pick up. Shelter. Real shelter. The passage opened suddenly. Ethan stepped forward and stopped. It wasn't a cave. Not exactly. It was a space shaped by intention. Stone walls, stacked and fitted together with a precision that didn't belong to nature. Not perfect, not polished, but deliberate. Someone had built this. Carefully, patiently, over time. A low structure stood to the left, a fire pit. The stones blackened at the center, as if flames had lived there for years. Opposite it, a raised platform made of layered rock, flat enough to sleep on, and along the far wall, shallow shelves carved directly into the stone. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Someone stayed here," he murmured. Ronan stepped into the chamber fully now, his silhouette emerging from the dark. His posture had shifted, no longer tense in the same way as before. Alert, yes, but curious. His nose moved constantly, tracking, testing, confirming. Then, a sharp crack echoed behind them. Ethan turned too late. A piece of stone broke loose from the narrow passage, Talmasa tumbling down with a heavy, dull thud. Dust filled the air, and then a sound, low, strained. "Ronan." Ethan's chest tightened instantly. He lunged forward, dropping to one knee. "Ronan." His hands reached blindly through the dust until they found fur. Warm, alive, but pinned. A chunk of fallen rock had trapped part of the dog's shoulder against the ground, not fully crushing him, but enough to hold him in place. Ronan didn't thrash, didn't panic. He held still, waiting, trusting. That was worse. "Easy, easy," Ethan muttered, his voice rougher now. His hands pressed against the stone, heavy, too heavy. His muscles screamed immediately, already worn from hours in the cold. But he pushed. Nothing. His breathing quickened. Not here. Not again. A flash hit him. Not the cave, not the stone. A different place. Sand. Smoke. A man lying in front of him, blood spreading too fast, eyes already fading. Ethan's grip tightened. No. He forced the image back, hard. "Stay with me," he muttered, though he didn't know if he was talking to Ronan or himself. He shifted his position, bracing his feet against the uneven ground, then pushed again, harder. The rock shifted, barely, but enough. Ronan pulled at the same time, using the space Ethan had created. "Come on!" One more push. The stone rolled just enough. Ronan slipped free, scrambling backward before catching his balance. Ethan collapsed slightly onto his hands, breath coming in sharp bursts. "You okay?" he asked immediately, reaching out. Ronan flinched. Just a fraction. That was enough. Ethan froze. Slowly, carefully, he ran his hand along the dog's side. There. A shallow cut along the shoulder, blood dark against the fur. Not deep, but real. Too real. For a second, Ethan's vision blurred again. Red. Too much red. Too familiar. His jaw clenched as he forced the memory down. Not this time, he said under his breath. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a strip of cloth. His hands moved fast, trained, precise, even with the tremor still running through them. "Hold still," he murmured. Ronan didn't move, didn't resist, just watched him. That steady gaze again. Ethan pressed the cloth against the wound, wrapping it tight enough to stop the bleeding without cutting off movement. "I've got you," he said quietly. This time the words didn't shake. Ronan's ears flicked once. Then he leaned, just slightly, into Ethan's hand. Ethan sat back slowly, letting his breathing settle. The dust in the air began to clear. The chamber returned. Stone, fire pit, shelves, and now, something else. Light, faint, but real. Ethan frowned, turning his head. There, near the ceiling, a narrow shaft cut through the rock. Just enough for daylight to filter down in a thin beam. Air, ventilation, deliberate. This wasn't just survival, he said quietly. This was planned. Ronan had already moved again, sniffing along the walls, then the floor, then toward the shelves. Ethan followed. The shelves weren't empty, not completely. His fingers brushed against something that wasn't stone. He pulled it free. A notebook. Old, worn. The edges curled slightly, the cover faded from time, but intact. Ethan stared at it for a long second, then opened it. The pages inside were yellowed, but preserved. Dry air had protected them from decay. The handwriting was steady, careful, controlled. At the top of the first page, Margaret Wren, October 1974. Ethan blinked. 1974, he muttered. That meant this place had been here for decades. He turned the page. Notes, detailed. Wind patterns, temperature changes, how the stone held heat, how long supplies lasted. Survival, layer by layer. But beneath that, something else. The tone shifted, subtle at first, then clearer. The sound came back again tonight. Not close, but closer than before. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He turned another page. I covered the entrance above. If he finds the house, he won't see this. Not unless he knows where to look. Ethan exhaled slowly. This wasn't just a shelter. It was a hiding place. He flipped to another page. This one was different. The handwriting pressed harder into the paper, less controlled, more urgent. The child can't stay here much longer. The air is too thin for her at night. I have to move her before winter sets in. Ethan froze. The child. He read it again, then again. His mind caught on the word, child. Not alone. She hadn't been alone down here. Ronan stopped moving. His head turned slowly toward Ethan, eyes locking onto him, as if he understood, as if he had known. Ethan swallowed. Who were you hiding? He whispered. He kept reading, page after page. The entries became shorter, tighter. He's still looking. I saw tracks this morning, not animals. If I don't come back... Ethan stopped. The sentence didn't finish. The next page was blank. He closed the notebook slowly. The weight of it settled into his hands, then into his chest. Ronan shifted beside him. Ethan looked down. The dog's breathing had slowed again, steadier now. The makeshift bandage held. You're good, Ethan murmured. Ronan's tail moved once, not a wag. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Ethan stood. His legs protested immediately. Exhaustion hadn't disappeared. It had just been waiting. But now, he wasn't exposed anymore. He wasn't in the open. He turned toward the fire pit, the blackened stone, the old wood stacked nearby, dry, preserved. Whoever had built this, they had planned for someone to survive here. Ethan crouched down, picking up a piece. solid, usable. He reached into his pocket. Matches. One left. He hesitated for half a second, then struck it. The flame flickered weakly at first, then steadied as he shielded it with his hand. He lowered it carefully. The wood caught, slow, then stronger. Light filled the chamber, pushing the shadows back. Warmth followed. Not much, but enough. Ethan sat back, watching the fire grow. Across from him, Ronan lowered himself to the ground. For the first time since they had entered, he relaxed. That told Ethan everything he needed to know. He leaned back against the stone wall. The notebook rested loosely in his hand. Margaret Wren, a woman who had built a life beneath the mountain, a woman who had hidden from something, or someone, a woman who had not been alone. Ethan stared into the flames, his shoulders finally lowered. For the first time since the door had closed behind him the night before. He wasn't thinking about where he had been, or what he had lost. He was thinking about what this place meant, and why he had been led here. He glanced at Ronan. The dog's eyes were half closed now, the firelight reflecting softly in them. "You knew, didn't you?" Ethan said quietly. Ronan didn't respond, but he didn't look away. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he murmured. "I think you did." The fire crackled softly. The mountain held its silence, and somewhere beneath the weight of everything he had lost, something else settled into place. Not safety. Not yet. But something close. A beginning. Ethan Calder didn't leave. Not the next morning. Not the next hour. He stayed. The fire burned low but steady in the stone pit, casting soft light against the walls that seemed to breathe with every flicker. Outside, the world still existed. Cold, vast, indifferent. But down here, beneath layers of earth and silence, something had shifted. For the first time since he was thrown out, Ethan wasn't exposed. He wasn't moving. He wasn't surviving moment to moment. He was still. And that unsettled him more than anything else. Ronan lay a few feet away from the fire, his body stretched along the stone floor, head resting on his paws. The German shepherd's breathing had steadied, his injured shoulder wrapped securely, though the fur around it remained darkened from dried blood. His ears twitched occasionally, never fully at rest. Even in sleep, he was listening. Ethan watched him for a moment, then looked back down at the notebook in his hands. Margaret Wren. He flipped to the next unread page. The handwriting had changed again, less about survival now, more personal. "I made the mistake of trusting them once. I won't make it again." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Them." He read on. "The town smiles the same way every morning. Like nothing is wrong, like no one knows. But I see it now. I see how they look at the house." Ethan leaned back slightly against the stone wall. A town, a house. His mind began to connect pieces without permission. He turned another page. "He came again today. Didn't knock. Just stood there, watching. Like he knows I can't leave yet." Ethan exhaled slowly. This wasn't paranoia. The details were too consistent, too grounded. Someone had been watching her, tracking her. He kept reading. "The child cried less tonight. That's good. It means she's learning to be quiet." Ethan's jaw tightened. The child again, not just a mention, a responsibility, a weight. He turned another page. "I can't keep her here through winter. The air is wrong at night. Too still, too thin. If I don't move her soon." The sentence trailed off. Ethan closed the notebook halfway, his thumb resting between the pages. "Why didn't you leave earlier?" he murmured. Ronan's head lifted slightly, not fully awake, but aware. The hours passed differently down there. No sunlight to mark them. Only the slow shift of light through the vent above, changing from pale gray to something dimmer, then back again. Ethan forced himself into motion. Routine. It was the only way to stay grounded. He checked the fire, adjusted the airflow near the shaft, just enough to keep smoke from building. Examined the stone walls, testing for loose sections after the earlier collapse. Everything held. Then the water. At the far end of the chamber, a shallow basin carved into the rock collected a slow, steady drip from above. Ethan crouched beside it, dipping his fingers in. Cold. Clean. He drank carefully, measured. Ronan joined him, lapping quietly. "Still with me," Ethan muttered. Ronan's tail shifted once. Later, Ronan moved again, not toward the entrance, not toward the fire. Toward a corner Ethan hadn't fully checked yet. The dog's posture changed, more focused. He began to dig, not aggressively like before, slower, controlled. Ethan stood, watching him. "What is it now?" Ronan didn't stop. His paws scraped against stone, then something softer beneath. Ethan crouched beside him, cleared away the debris, and saw it. A small object, partially buried. He picked it up. A necklace. Simple. A thin chain, tarnished with time, holding a small pendant shaped like a leaf. Not decorative, worn, touched often. Ethan turned it in his fingers. There was an engraving on the back, faint. He wiped it clean. M.W. Margaret Wren. He swallowed. Ronan sniffed at the ground again, then stepped aside. There was something else. Ethan reached down, pulled free a small photograph. The edges were curled, the surface faded, but still visible. A young woman, mid-20s maybe, her hair loose, wind-blown, dark against her pale skin. Her face carried a softness that hadn't been hardened yet by fear or time. In her arms, a child, wrapped tightly in a blanket. Too young to recognize, but real. Ethan stared at it longer than he meant to. Something about the background caught his eye. He leaned closer. Trees, a slope, a narrow stream cutting through the ground. His breath slowed. "No," he whispered. He had seen that before. Not here, somewhere else. The image shifted in his mind. Clearer now. A memory, younger, running barefoot through wet grass, chasing the sound of water. The same bend in the stream. The same crooked tree leaning slightly over it. Ethan's grip tightened on the photograph. "That's," he murmured. Ronan's head lifted sharply, eyes locking onto Ethan, as if he felt it too, as if something had just crossed an invisible line. Ethan swallowed. "That's the land. The place he grew up, the house, the stream behind it. The same one." The photograph slipped slightly in his hand. Why would she be there? The question stayed with him, long after the fire dimmed, long after the air grew colder. Ethan paced slowly near the center of the chamber, the photograph and necklace now resting beside the notebook. The pieces didn't fit cleanly, but they were close, too close. Margaret Wren had been hiding. She had a child. She had been near his home. And his father? Ethan's jaw tightened. No, not yet. He wasn't ready to finish that thought. Ronan stood suddenly, rigid. Ethan turned immediately. "What is it?" The dog didn't move. His ears were forward, every muscle locked in place. Listening. Ethan followed his line of sight. Toward the entrance. Nothing. Just darkness. But something had changed. The air, the stillness. Ethan moved slowly toward the passage. Each step controlled, silent. He reached the edge of the narrow opening and crouched slightly, peering out. The world beyond was dim now, evening settling in. Snow untouched. Trees standing still. No movement. He exhaled quietly. "Nothing," he muttered. But Ronan didn't relax. That was enough. Ethan stayed there a moment longer, then stepped back inside. Night came without warning. The kind of night that didn't fade in gradually, but simply appeared. The chamber darkened, the light from the shaft disappearing completely, leaving only the fire as a source of visibility. The silence deepened. Not empty. Heavy. Ethan sat near the wall, the notebook resting beside him, the photograph still in his hand. Ronan lay near the entrance now. Not sleeping. Watching. Always watching. Time stretched. Minutes or hours. Ethan wasn't sure. Then, a sound. Soft. Almost nothing. He froze. Listened. There. Again. Snow shifting. Outside. Ethan stood slowly, every instinct sharpening at once. He moved toward the entrance again. Careful. Measured. Ronan was already there, his body tense, eyes fixed forward. Ethan reached the opening, looked out. At first, nothing. Then, he saw it. Tracks, fresh, cutting through the snow in a straight line toward the hidden structure. Boot prints. Human. Ethan's chest tightened. He followed them with his eyes, step by step, closer, closer, until they stopped. Right in front of the entrance. No further, no retreat, just ended, as if the person had stood there for a long time. Ethan's breathing slowed. "Why didn't they come in?" he whispered. Behind him, Ronan let out a low sound. Not a growl, something else. Warning. Ethan didn't move, didn't step outside, didn't call out. He just watched. The darkness beyond the trees didn't answer. The snow didn't shift again. Nothing revealed itself. But the feeling that someone had been there, watching, waiting, didn't fade. Ethan stepped back slowly. The entrance swallowed the last of the outside light as he moved deeper into the chamber. The fire flickered. Ronan stayed near the passage, unmoving, guarding. Ethan looked down at the photograph again, at the woman, at the child, at the place he knew too well. And then, toward the notebook. Margaret Wren hadn't disappeared. She had hidden. She had been hunted. And somehow, she had been connected to his life long before he ever knew her name. Ethan exhaled slowly. "We're not alone," he said quietly. Ronan didn't look away from the entrance, and neither did he. The storm didn't arrive. It descended. One moment, the forest outside the stone shelter was still, quiet in that unnatural way that came before something broke. The next, the air shifted violently, pressure dropping so fast Ethan Calder felt it in his bones before he saw it. He was already moving toward the entrance when the first gust hit. Wind tore through the trees with a force that didn't belong to nature. Snow lifted from the ground and twisted into the air, spinning like ash in a firestorm. The narrow opening at the top of the shaft dimmed as gray clouds swallowed what little light remained. "This isn't normal," Ethan muttered. Ronan was already standing. The German shepherd's posture had changed completely, no longer cautious, no longer curious. Locked, every muscle tight, ears flattened slightly against the wind pressure pushing through the vent. Ethan stepped toward the entrance again, shielding his eyes as another gust slammed into the mountain. Then, he heard it. At first he thought it was the storm, but it wasn't. Not entirely. There was something underneath it. A break in the rhythm. A sound that didn't belong. Human. Faint, carried in fragments through the wind. Ethan froze. Ronan's head snapped toward the opening. They both heard it. Ethan's instincts split instantly. Stay inside. Survive, or go out. Risk everything. He didn't move. Not yet. His mind calculated. Distance, visibility, temperature drop, wind velocity. Out there, a person wouldn't last long. Not like this. Ronan stepped forward. One step, then another. Ethan grabbed his collar instinctively. No. The dog stopped, but only because Ethan had made him. The tension in Ronan's body didn't ease. It grew. The sound came again. Closer this time, weaker, breaking apart under the weight of the storm. Ethan exhaled slowly. "This is how people die," he muttered under his breath. Not from the storm, from the decision. From choosing to move when staying would have been safer. He had seen it. Men pushing forward into conditions they couldn't beat. Men who never came back. Ronan shifted, then looked at him. Not waiting, not asking. Just knowing. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. "Damn it," he said quietly. Ronan didn't wait. He slipped free the moment Ethan's grip loosened and moved toward the passage. Ethan followed. Of course he did. The cold hit like a wall, instant, violent. The moment Ethan stepped outside, the wind slammed into him hard enough to stagger his footing. Snow blasted across his face, sharp as glass, blinding, disorienting. He forced his eyes open. Barely. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, the world reduced to shifting white and gray. "Ronan!" he called out. The sound vanished immediately. Swallowed. He pushed forward anyway. Step. Then another. His boots sank into uneven drifts, his balance constantly shifting under the force of the wind. Then, movement. Low, fast, Ronan. The dog cut through the storm ahead of him, barely visible, but moving with absolute certainty. Ethan followed. Because that was the only option. They found her first. A woman, half buried in snow, her body curled slightly as if trying to protect herself from the cold. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her immediately, brushing snow away from her face. She was in her early 30s, maybe mid-30s. Lean, with a weathered look that suggested she wasn't new to the outdoors. Her dark brown hair was tangled with ice, strands stuck against her pale face. Her lips were cracked, her breathing shallow. But there, alive. "Hey, stay with me," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. Her eyes flickered open, brown, sharp, focused despite everything. "Don't leave them," she whispered. Her voice was barely there. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Where?" She tried to lift her hand, failed. Ronan moved, already turning, already tracking. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled the woman up, shifting her weight across his shoulders. She was light, too light. "You're not dying out here," he muttered. They found the child next. A small figure curled near a fallen tree. A girl, maybe 6 years old. Thin, wrapped in layers that weren't enough. Her blonde hair peeked out from under a worn knit cap, strands frozen stiff. Her face was pale, almost blue at the edges. Ethan's chest tightened. He crouched, brushing snow from her face. She didn't wake, but her chest moved. Barely. "Ronan." The dog stayed close, circling once, then stilling. Ethan adjusted his grip on the woman, then carefully lifted the girl into his other arm. The weight shifted. Dangerous, but manageable. "Stay with me," he muttered again. More to himself this time. The wind shifted. For a split second, it dropped. Just enough. Just long enough for Ethan to hear something else. Not a cry, not movement, a voice, clear, close. "Over here." Ethan froze. His head snapped toward the sound. Nothing. Just white. Just storm. Ronan didn't move. didn't react. The dog's focus remained fixed in a completely different direction. Ethan's breathing slowed. That hadn't been real. Or had it? The storm roared back instantly, louder than before, swallowing the moment whole. Ethan swallowed. "Not now," he muttered, and kept moving. The third was easier to spot. A young man, early 20s maybe, lying on his side, one leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. His face was partially covered in snow, but his dark hair and stubble made him stand out against the white. Ethan dropped to one knee beside him. The man groaned weakly. "Good. Alive." "Can you move?" Ethan asked. The man shook his head slightly. "Leg?" Ethan nodded once. "Don't try." He shifted his weight again, lowering the woman carefully just long enough to reposition. This was getting dangerous. Too much weight. Too little stability. But there was no other option. Ronan stayed close, watching, calculating, waiting for the next move. The fourth was older, much older. A man in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. His frame was thin, shoulders hunched even in unconsciousness. His gray beard was crusted with ice, his skin pale and drawn tight against sharp cheekbones. Ethan checked his pulse. Slow, weak, but there. "Still breathing," he muttered. The old man didn't respond, didn't move. Ethan exhaled. One more, just one more. Then they go back. But Ronan didn't turn. The dog moved forward, further. Ethan frowned. "That's enough." Ronan didn't stop. Ethan followed. Because at this point, there was no turning back. They found him standing, barely. A tall man leaning heavily against a tree, his body swaying under the force of the wind. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe pushing 50. Broad-shouldered once, but worn down now. His dark hair was streaked with early gray, pulled back loosely, his face lined deeply. Sharp features hardened by years of something that hadn't been easy. His eyes opened when Ethan approached. Clear. Too clear for someone this close to collapse. "You?" the man rasped. Ethan didn't respond. Didn't ask questions. Not here. Not now. The man's gaze shifted past him. To Ronan. Something flickered there. Recognition. Then it was gone. His knees buckled. Ethan caught him. "Yeah," he muttered. "You're coming too." The return was worse. Every step heavier. The storm stronger. Ethan's body screamed at him to stop, to rest, just for a minute. He had seen that before too. Men sitting down in the cold. Men who never got up again. "Move," he muttered. Step, drag, lift, repeat. Ronan stayed ahead, cutting the path. Never hesitating. Never slowing. At one point, Ethan stumbled, his knee hitting the ground hard enough to jar his entire body. He almost dropped the girl. Almost. Ronan stopped immediately, turned, waited. Ethan gritted his teeth, pushed himself up. "Don't you stop," he muttered. To himself. To the storm. To everything. Then, the rock. The entrance, barely visible through the white. Relief hit hard, but he didn't let it slow him. Not yet. Not until they were inside. The moment they crossed back into the passage, the wind disappeared. Silence hit just as hard. Ethan dropped to one knee, lowering the bodies carefully onto the stone floor. "Stay with me," he said again. He moved immediately. Fire, airflow, positioning. Everything had to be right. No mistakes. Not after all of that. Ronan moved between them, checking each one, watching, guarding. The fire caught again. Slow, then stronger. Heat spread, small, but enough. Ethan sat back slightly, his breathing still uneven, alive. All of them, for now. Time passed. Minutes, maybe longer. The storm outside didn't stop, but inside, life held. The woman woke first. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening quickly as she took in her surroundings. She pushed herself up slightly. "Where? You're inside," Ethan said. "Safe." She studied him, really studied him, then nodded once. "Lila," she said quietly. "Lila Mercer." Ethan nodded. "Ethan." No more than that. She glanced around. The others. The fire. Then the notebook. Her eyes narrowed slightly. But she didn't say anything. Not yet. The last to wake was the man. He inhaled sharply, his body jerking slightly as his eyes opened. They locked onto Ethan immediately. "You brought me here," he said. Not a question, a statement. Ethan didn't answer. The man's gaze shifted. To Ronan. Then to the notebook beside the fire. His expression changed. Something deeper. Something unsettled. He pushed himself up slightly, ignoring the strain. "You found it," he said quietly. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Found what?" The man didn't look at him. He was staring at the notebook, like it mattered more than anything else in the room. Then he spoke again, slow, measured. "You're not the first one a dog has brought here. The storm didn't end all at once. It loosened its grip. The wind dropped from a roar to a low, uneven breath that moved through the mountain like something tired of fighting. The snow no longer slammed against the stone. It drifted instead, softer now, settling into a quiet that felt almost unnatural after the violence of the night. Inside the chamber, the fire burned stronger. Not just heat, life. Ethan Calder hadn't slept. Not really. He had closed his eyes once, maybe twice, but his mind never left the room. Every breath, every movement, every small sound from the survivors kept him anchored to the moment. Ronan stayed close, always. The German shepherd moved between the injured, checking them in silent loops. His shoulders still stiff from the wound, but his posture steady, controlled. When anyone shifted, he was there. When the fire dimmed, he noticed before Ethan did. Like the space itself had become his responsibility. Ethan leaned back against the stone wall, his hand resting loosely on the notebook beside him. Margaret Wren. The name didn't feel distant anymore. Not after everything. Not after the photograph. Not after the way her words had started to feel less like history and more like memory. Across from him, Lila Mercer sat upright now, wrapped in a blanket Ethan had pieced together from old cloth and spare fabric. Her face had regained some color, though exhaustion still clung to her in the way her shoulders slumped slightly forward. She was watching him, not casually, carefully. "You read it," she said quietly. Her voice was stronger now, but still edged with fatigue. Ethan didn't look up. "Some of it." Lila studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "I saw that place before," she said. That made Ethan look up. "What place?" She gestured faintly toward the walls. "This. Not exactly, but something like it. Old structures hidden in the mountains, built during the 70s, people hiding from things they couldn't fight head-on." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. People like Margaret. Lila didn't answer immediately, but her silence confirmed enough. Derek Vale hadn't moved much since waking. He sat near the far wall, his back against the stone, the notebook resting in his hands. His fingers moved slowly across the pages. Not reading, not searching, remembering. He was older than Ethan had first thought. Close to 50, maybe a little more. His face was carved with deep lines that didn't come from age alone. Years of tension, years of holding something in. His hair, once dark, now carried streaks of gray near the temples. His beard was uneven, trimmed poorly, like maintenance had never been a priority. But his eyes, sharp, clear, too aware. "You didn't just find this place," Derek said suddenly. Ethan didn't respond. "You were led here." Ronan lifted his head slightly at the sound of Derek's voice, watching him. Not hostile, but not relaxed either. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Say what you came to say." Derek looked down at the notebook again, then flipped it. Not through the pages, through the cover. His fingers pressed along the inside edge, testing. Ethan frowned slightly. "What are you doing?" Derek didn't answer. His hand moved more deliberately now, tracing something hidden beneath the inner lining. Then, a tear, soft, deliberate. The binding gave just enough for something thin to slip free. A folded piece of paper, older than the rest, preserved, hidden. Ethan's breath slowed. "Where did you—" "It was always there," Derek said quietly. "You just didn't know where to look." He held it out. Ethan took it. Carefully. The paper felt fragile, important, like it had waited longer than anything else in this place. Ethan unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was the same. Margaret Wren. But this was different. More deliberate, more personal. He read, "If you are reading this, then you have already done what I prayed you would. Survive." Ethan's chest tightened slightly. He kept reading. "I couldn't keep you here. Not through winter. Not with him still searching. So I gave you to the only man I believed could disappear without being found." Ethan's fingers tightened on the page. His breathing slowed, controlled, measured. "He won't tell you the truth. Not because he doesn't love you, but because truth is what gets people killed." The words hit harder than they should have. Not because they were unexpected, but because they weren't. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. For a moment, the chamber disappeared, replaced by something else. A memory. Faint, fragmented. A man standing in the doorway of a small wooden house. Tall, broad-shouldered, silent. Watching the world like it had already taken too much from him. Ethan's father, not by blood, but by choice. The memory sharpened. A younger Ethan, maybe 8 or 9, standing near the table. "Why don't we go into town more?" The man had paused, just for a second, then answered without looking at him. "Because some places aren't meant to find you." The chamber came back. The fire, the cold, the letter in his hands. Ethan swallowed. "That wasn't random," he whispered. Ronan stepped closer, pressed lightly against his leg, grounding. Ethan continued reading. "I gave you to a man who knows how to keep silence. A man who would rather die than speak when speaking would cost a life." His jaw tightened. Now it was clear. Not just suspicion, confirmation. His father had known, all of it. If you ever return here, it means he did his job. It means you lived. Ethan lowered the letter slowly. The weight of it settled deeper than anything else had so far. Across from him, Derek watched quietly. "You understand now," he said. Ethan didn't answer. Didn't need to. Lila leaned forward slightly. "What does it say?" Ethan hesitated, then handed it to her. She read silently, her expression shifting as she moved through the lines. Understanding. Then something softer. Respect. "He protected you," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. But his eyes had already moved past the letter, to something else. A small cloth-wrapped bundle that had fallen from the inside cover when Derek pulled the page free. Ethan reached for it, unwrapped it carefully. Inside, a metal tag, simple, worn, engraved, coordinates, and a name, M. Quinn. Ethan frowned. "Who's that?" Lila asked. Derek answered before Ethan could. "Mabel Quinn." Ethan looked up sharply. "You know her?" Derek nodded slowly. Everyone did. Back then. He shifted slightly, wincing as his body protested the movement. Small town. People think secrets don't exist in places like that. But they do. They just change shape. Ethan waited. Derek continued. "She was the only one who ever questioned your father, quietly, never in public. But she knew something didn't add up." Lila frowned slightly. "And?" Derek exhaled. "She saw him one night, years ago, carrying something." Ethan's chest tightened. "What?" Derek met his eyes. "A child." Silence filled the chamber, heavy, unavoidable. "She never told anyone," Derek continued. "Not even when people started asking questions about Margaret. Not even when things got worse." "Why?" Ethan asked. Derek's gaze didn't waver. "Because she understood something most people don't." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What?" Derek leaned back slightly against the wall. "That sometimes the truth doesn't save people." The fire cracked softly. Ronan shifted beside Ethan, his presence steady as always. Ethan looked down at the letter again, then at the coordinates, then at nothing. His entire life, rewritten in a matter of minutes. Not abandoned, not unwanted, hidden, protected, saved. The difference mattered, more than he expected. Lila spoke again, softer this time. "So, what does that make you?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ronan. The dog met his gaze, steady, unshaken. Then Ethan exhaled slowly. "Alive," he said. Derek watched him for a long moment, then spoke again. "There's something else you need to understand." Ethan looked up. Derek's voice was quieter now, but sharper. "Your father didn't stay silent because he was afraid." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why?" Derek held his gaze. "Because if he told you the truth..." He paused. "Just long enough. You wouldn't have lived long enough to come back here." The words didn't echo. They settled, heavy, permanent. Ethan didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't question it. Because deep down, he already knew it was true. Ronan leaned into him slightly, and for the first time since the storm began. Ethan didn't feel like he was running anymore. The storm passed. Not with a grand ending, not with sunlight breaking through like a promise fulfilled. It simply loosened. The wind dropped into silence. The snow settled into stillness. And the mountain, for the first time in days, felt like it had exhaled. Inside the chamber, the fire burned low but steady. Ethan Calder stood near the entrance, watching the light return in thin, pale lines through the narrow opening above. It wasn't warm, not yet, but it was enough to reveal edges, shapes, reality. Ronan stood beside him. The German shepherd's posture had shifted again, no longer locked in survival, no longer bracing for impact. Still alert, but calm, like he understood something Ethan was only beginning to grasp. Behind them, movement, voices, soft at first, then clearer. The survivors were awake now, all of them. Lila Mercer stood with effort, one hand braced against the stone wall. Her movements were controlled, deliberate, the kind of control that came from someone used to pushing through exhaustion rather than waiting for it to pass. The young man with the injured leg leaned against a makeshift support, his face pale but conscious. The older man sat near the fire, wrapped tightly in cloth, his breathing slow but steady. The little girl, no longer motionless, sat quietly, her small hands wrapped around a tin cup, watching everything with wide, observant eyes. Alive. Every single one. Ethan nodded once. That was enough. The sound came first, distant, low, not wind, not natural. Ronan's ears lifted instantly. Ethan turned. Then he heard it too. Engines, faint but growing. Lila's head snapped toward the entrance. "You hear that?" Ethan didn't answer. He was already moving. Outside, the forest looked different. Not untouched. Not quiet. Changed. Snow drifts had reshaped the land entirely, covering tracks, swallowing paths, erasing anything that might have told a story of what had happened here. But the sound, it cut through everything. Machines, voices, human. Ronan stepped forward. Ethan followed. And then they appeared. Figures moving through the trees. Search and rescue. Bright jackets cutting through the white landscape. Their movements precise. Coordinated. Practiced. One of them spotted Ethan immediately. "Hey, over here." Ethan raised a hand. Not to call them closer. Just to confirm, yes. They had found them. Everything after that moved fast. Voices filled the space where silence had lived. Hands, blankets, stretcher frames, questions. "Anyone else inside? How many survivors? How long have you been out here?" Ethan answered what he needed to. Nothing more. Ronan stayed at his side, always. The survivors were brought out one by one, carefully. Lila last. Before she stepped away, she paused, looked at Ethan. "You staying?" she asked quietly. Ethan didn't answer immediately, then nodded once. "For now." She studied him for a second longer, then gave a small nod of her own, like she understood something deeper than the words. Then she turned and followed the others. Derek Vale was the last to be carried out. He didn't resist, didn't speak. But as they passed Ethan, his eyes found him. Held for a moment, something unspoken, then gone. The noise faded, the movement slowed, until it was quiet again. Just Ethan and Ronan, standing at the edge of something that no longer felt like exile. Footsteps, different this time, slower, less certain. Ethan didn't turn immediately. He already knew. Owen and Clara. They stood a few feet behind him, not close, not distant, just there. Owen looked older, not physically, but in the way his shoulders carried weight differently now. His posture, once rigid with quiet authority, had softened into something uncertain. His dark hair, streaked with gray, hung slightly unkempt, and his eyes avoided Ethan's at first. Clara stood beside him, still composed, still controlled. But the sharpness was gone, replaced by something harder to define: regret. She was tall, slender, her blonde hair pulled back neatly despite the travel, her pale skin marked faintly by the cold. Her posture remained straight, but her hands, clasped tightly in front of her, gave her away. Neither spoke. Not at first. Ethan turned slowly, faced them. The past didn't rush back. It didn't hit him the way it once might have. It simply existed. Owen cleared his throat. "We heard," he said. Stopped. Tried again. "We didn't know." Ethan watched him, waited. Clara stepped forward slightly. "We didn't understand what your father was doing," she said quietly. "Or why?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And now?" Clara's eyes dropped for just a second, then lifted again. "Now we do." Silence, not empty, not tense, just real. Owen finally looked at him directly, for the first time. We were wrong. Ethan held his gaze long enough, then exhaled. Slow, measured. You were, he said. No anger, no edge, just truth. Owen swallowed. Clara shifted slightly, as if expecting more. There wasn't. Ethan turned away. That was it. No confrontation, no resolution, because none was needed. He walked back toward the entrance, toward the stone, toward the place that had taken him in when nothing else did. Ronan followed, without hesitation. Inside, the chamber felt different. Not empty, not temporary, settled. Ethan moved slowly through the space, his eyes taking in every detail again. The fire pit, the shelves, the notebook. Margaret Wren. Everything that had led him here. He crouched near his bag, the old one, worn, faded. He hadn't opened it fully since the night he left. Didn't need to. Everything important had been immediate. Survival, movement. Now, he unzipped it, slowly, carefully. Inside, clothes, tools, and something else, wrapped, tucked beneath everything else. Ethan frowned slightly. He didn't remember packing that. He pulled it free, unwrapped it. A folded map, hand-drawn, aged. His breath slowed. He opened it. The forest, detailed, paths, contours, markers. And there, a symbol, exact, precise. The stone house, marked clearly. Ethan stared at it. Then, a smaller piece of paper slipped free. He caught it instinctively, unfolded it. One line. Simple, steady handwriting. His father's. If you find this place, it means I kept my promise to your mother. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. For a long moment, everything, every question, every doubt, every piece of the past, locked into place, not abandoned, not forgotten, chosen, protected, finished. A memory surfaced, not sharp, not clear, but real. A hand on his shoulder, firm, grounding. You don't need to understand it now, the voice had said. Just live long enough to. Ethan blinked. The chamber returned. The fire, the map, the note in his hand. And for the first time, he did understand. He folded the paper carefully, placed it back into the map, then set both beside the notebook, together, where they belonged. Days passed, then more. The forest didn't feel the same anymore. Not hostile, not empty, alive. Ethan stayed, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because, for the first time, he did. He repaired the structure, reinforced the entrance, cleared debris, improved airflow through the shaft. The place wasn't hidden anymore, but it was still protected, still strong, still capable of saving someone. Ronan adapted with him. The dog's movements became slower, more relaxed, but never careless, never unaware. He chose a place near the entrance, a step above the threshold, and lay there, often, watching, guarding, exactly as Margaret had once described. A dog that would not leave the doorway. Ethan noticed. Didn't comment. Didn't need to. The forest brightened. Spring didn't arrive all at once. But it came, slowly. Light reflecting differently off the snow. Shadows softening. Air shifting. One morning, Ethan stepped outside. Ronan beside him. They stood there, not looking for anything, not waiting. Just standing. The trees stretched upward, tall and endless. The same forest. But not the same place. Not anymore. Ethan exhaled slowly, then nodded once. This is it, he said quietly. Ronan's tail moved once. Small, certain. The past didn't follow him here. It led him here. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Calder wasn't surviving. He was beginning. There are moments in life when everything is taken away so quietly that we don't even realize something greater is being given in return. Ethan thought he was abandoned, left behind, forgotten. But the truth was, he was being protected all along. Sometimes, what feels like rejection is actually redirection. Sometimes the path that hurts the most is the one that leads us exactly where we are meant to be. And sometimes, God doesn't speak in words. He speaks through silence, through timing, through the right person or even the right animal appearing at the exact moment we are about to break. That dog didn't just save a life. He carried a purpose, a promise, a path written long before Ethan understood it. Maybe in your life, there is something you've been questioning. A door that closed. A loss you never understood. A path that made no sense. But what if it was never meant to make sense in that moment? What if God was simply asking you to keep going, long enough to understand later? If this story touched you in any way, take a moment to share where you're watching from. Your voice matters more than you think. And if you believe that miracles still exist, not always as something supernatural, but as quiet moments of protection, guidance, and second chances, then leave a comment below. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder that they are not alone. And if you want more stories about loyalty, purpose, and the unseen ways life can change us, subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories and stay with us for the next journey. May God watch over you, guide your steps when the road feels unclear, and give you strength when you feel like giving up. May He remind you in the quietest moments that you are exactly where you need to be.